Gloria Grahame's affair with her stepson made Hollywood's most infamous downfall. She won an Oscar. Then came the bedroom. She won an Academy Award with 9 minutes and 32 seconds of screen time. Not 9 hours, not 9 scenes, 9 minutes. And in that same year, the year Hollywood placed a golden statue in her hands, there was a 15-year-old boy sleeping in her bed. His name was Tony Ray, and he called her stepmother. This is not the story of a femme fatale. Every article ever written about Gloria Grahame calls her a femme fatale, and every single one of them is wrong. This is the story of what happens when an entire industry decides a woman is only useful for one thing, and what she burns down when she finally stops agreeing. By the time most people heard her name, the damage was already done. But it wasn't done by the scandal they think they know. It was done 2 decades before, in the offices of a man who saw her talent, couldn't categorize it, and sold her off like surplus equipment. The machine that made her. Her real name was Gloria Hallward, born November 28, 1923, in Los Angeles, to an architect father and a mother who was a British stage actress turned acting teacher. From the time she could speak, her mother, Jean, was shaping the syllables, training the posture, choreographing the breath. Acting was not a career choice in that household. It was the air. Her grandfather, Reginald Francis Hallward, was the man Oscar Wilde called a close friend. The character of Basil Hallward in The Picture of Dorian Gray, the artist who paints a portrait so perfect it becomes a curse, carries the family name. Gloria Grahame grew up in a house where the line between a person and their image had been philosophically unstable for 3 generations. She dropped out of Hollywood high school at 16. 2 years later, she was on Broadway. Louis B. Mayer saw her on that stage in 1944, liked what he saw, and signed her to a $250 a week contract. Then he had absolutely no idea what to do with her. She didn't fit the MGM mold, not the ingenue box, not the glamour goddess box, not the reliable supporting player box. He loaned her out to other studios repeatedly, unable to package her, frustrated by someone whose appeal he could feel but couldn't name. 2 years into that contract, Frank Capra borrowed her for a film called It's a Wonderful Life. She played Violet Bick, the town flirt of Bedford Falls. And in those few scenes, something became clear that neither MGM nor Capra could fully articulate. Gloria Grahame had the rare and slightly unnerving ability to play warmth and danger at exactly the same time. Her Violet was funny, genuinely charming, fully alive. But the moment the film shifted into its nightmare version of Bedford Falls, you understood what that warmth was always sitting on top of. Something unsteady, something that the wrong circumstances could curdle. Capra didn't know he was making a prophecy about her actual life. MGM did eventually figure out what to do with her. They sold her contract to RKO, and RKO figured it out immediately. She was the go-to actress for film noir, the genre built on dangerous women and doomed men, and the slow, inevitable collapse of every good intention. She was the woman directors called when they needed someone who could make the audience want something they knew was going to destroy them. Here is what none of those directors knew about her, or at least what none of them said out loud. Before every kissing scene, and there were a great many kissing scenes, Gloria Grahame stuffed a wad of cotton wadding along her upper gum line. She believed her upper lip was too thin, too angular, not full enough to be beautiful on camera. So she padded it herself, every single time. On the set of The Big Heat in 1953, her co-star Glenn Ford pulled away from a scene and found wet cotton in his mouth. He didn't say anything. Nobody said anything, ever. Because nobody wanted to be the person who told Gloria Grahame to stop doing the thing she was doing to her face. Because everyone could see, even if they didn't say it, that this wasn't vanity. This was something older and harder than vanity. By the late 1940s, she had started having plastic surgery. First small procedures around her lips, then larger ones. Then the surgery that went wrong, that destroyed the nerve endings in her upper lip entirely, leaving it partially numb and partially paralyzed for the rest of her life. People in Hollywood called her the girl with the Novocaine Lips and thought it was a clever observation about her sensuality. They didn't understand they were describing the result of a wound. A woman who had spent 40 years being told she was one of the most beautiful people alive looked in the mirror and saw only the things that needed fixing. Every single one of us has been in a version of that room, standing in front of something we can't make ourselves stop seeing wrong. The difference is, most of us don't have a film industry confirming that the thing we hate about ourselves is the only thing about us worth looking at. She was going to destroy herself trying to be enough for a camera that would never love her back. And she hadn't even gotten to the worst part yet. 9 minutes and a secret. In 1948, one day after her first marriage was legally annulled, Gloria Grahame married Nicholas Ray. She was 4 months pregnant. Ray would later direct Rebel Without a Cause, one of the defining films about the collapse of the American family, a choice of subject matter that, in retrospect, does not seem coincidental. He admitted the nature of their relationship plainly, years later. I was infatuated by her, but I didn't like her very much. He made her sign a contract, not a studio contract, a marriage contract, typed, formal, notarized. It stated, in writing, that Gloria was not permitted to nag, coax, tease, or in any feminine way attempt to distract or influence him during working hours. 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Saturday. His time was his. She was his wife, and she was also, legally, contractually, his subordinate. In 1950, Ray directed her alongside Humphrey Bogart in A Lonely Place, a film about a volatile screenwriter suspected of murder and the woman who loves him despite knowing what he might be capable of. It is widely considered one of the greatest film noirs ever made. It has a 96% approval rating. Critics call it a masterpiece of psychological tension. What critics rarely mention is that Gloria and Nicholas Ray's marriage was visibly disintegrating throughout the entire production. The claustrophobia in that film, the feeling of being trapped in a relationship with someone whose love and danger are indistinguishable from each other. That wasn't acting. Ray had moved out of the family home and was sleeping on the studio lot. Gloria was raising their son Timothy essentially alone. 2 years later, MGM borrowed her for The Bad and the Beautiful. She appeared on screen for 9 minutes and 32 seconds. That is not a metaphor or a rounding. 9 minutes and 32 seconds in a film full of established stars, in a role that required her to play a woman unraveling in real time with nothing but her face and her hands and whatever is happening behind her eyes. The Academy nominated her for Best Supporting Actress. She was not expected to win. March 19, 1953. The RKO Pantages Theater in Hollywood. The first Oscar ceremony ever broadcast on live television. Edmund Gwenn opened the envelope and called her name. She walked to the stage on heels that seemed uncertain of their purpose. She took the statuette. She looked at it for a moment, the way you look at something you don't entirely believe is real. And then she said 4 words. "Thank you very much." She turned. She walked into the wings. The room laughed. Affectionately, they assumed. By the next morning, 3 separate gossip columns had reported she'd been drunk at the ceremony, that she'd tripped on the stairs, that she'd muttered something inappropriate into a microphone. None of it was true. She had been terrified. She had been standing in front of more cameras than she'd ever faced at once, holding a piece of hardware that represented everything Hollywood said she should want, and she had absolutely no idea how to perform the emotion she was supposed to be feeling, because she wasn't feeling it. She was feeling something more complicated and less photogenic. She declined the post-ceremony press interviews. That single decision earned her more enemies in Hollywood than anything else she ever did. That same evening, she brought the Oscar home and gave it to her son Timothy to use as a toy. When someone asked why, she said, "No mother takes away her child's favorite toy." What Nicholas Ray found. June 10, 1950. A 12-year-old boy named Tony stepped off a flight at Los Angeles Airport. His mother had sent him from New York to spend the summer with his father. His father was Nicholas Ray. Nicholas Ray was not there to meet him. The woman at the arrivals gate wore a cashmere sweater with a low neckline and drove a black Cadillac convertible with the roof down. She was his father's wife. She told him his father was busy and that she would take him home. That summer, while Nicholas Ray worked and gambled, Gloria and Tony spent their days together. According to Tony's own account, written when he was 21 years old, sealed and left with instructions that it not be published until every person named in it had died, Gloria gave him vodka and cigarettes. She asked him to comb her hair in the mornings. She asked him to dry her back when she came out of the shower. She taught him, as he wrote in those pages, how to kiss properly. And then it went beyond teaching. "I was 12 years old," he wrote. "What followed left me psychologically damaged for more than 50 years. The following summer, 1951, Tony returned to California from military school. Nicholas Ray was not home when he arrived. Gloria opened the door. There is no delicate construction that makes the next part anything other than what it is. Nicholas Ray came home and found his 13-year-old son and his wife in a situation that required no interpretation. He filed for divorce. The official documents cited incompatibility. He sent Tony away and did not speak publicly about the reason. Gloria continued making films. The secret held for almost a decade. In 1960, in a courthouse in Tijuana, Mexico, Gloria Grahame, 37 years old, married Tony Ray. He was 23. They kept the marriage secret for 2 years. When the tabloids broke the story in 1962, the reaction was immediate and unsparing. Both of Gloria's previous ex-husbands filed legal actions simultaneously. Cy Howard, her third husband, sought to have their daughter removed from Gloria's custody, arguing that she was an unfit mother. Nicholas Ray, who had known what happened in 1951 and had stayed silent about it for 11 years, now weaponized it in a custody dispute over their son Timothy. The geometry of it was almost impossible to hold in the mind at once. Tony Ray was now Gloria's husband. He was also the half-brother of Timothy, the child Gloria had with Nicholas Ray. That made Tony simultaneously Timothy's stepfather and his half-brother. The children Gloria had with Tony during the marriage were Timothy's half-siblings on their mother's side and his half-nephews on their father's side. Hollywood had no category for this. It had no language for it. And in the absence of language, it used the only tool it had: silence, followed by exile. How Hollywood uses a wound. In 1954, between her Oscar win and the Tijuana marriage that would end her career, Gloria Grahame was cast in the film adaptation of Oklahoma as Ado Annie, the girl who can't say no. She could not sing. This was not a matter of preference or nerves. She was, in the technical sense, tone deaf. Director Fred Zinnemann required all cast members to perform their own vocals. The solution his team arrived at was this. Gloria would record each individual note of each song as a separate, isolated sound, and the editors would assemble those notes into something resembling melody in post-production. It worked, technically. The result sounds less like singing and more like precise speech with a musical undertone, which is both a description of her performance and an unintentional metaphor for her entire career. Her colleagues on the production were aware of the arrangement and made certain she remained aware that they were aware. She was told, repeatedly and by multiple people, that her presence in a musical was an embarrassment. She responded in the only way she ever responded to being backed into a corner. She pushed back harder than made any tactical sense. On separate occasions during filming, she physically struck Charlotte Greenwood and Jean Nelson, two of the most respected musical theater performers of their generation. She stepped on other actors' lines. She moved her blocking mid-take to push scene partners out of frame. At the cast wrap party, not one person spoke to her. She left the production professionally radioactive. Within the industry, she was marked as impossible, not just difficult, but impossible. The woman who couldn't carry a tune had been hired to play a woman who couldn't say no, and she had burned the whole arrangement to the ground. What nobody said, and what you can only see from the outside looking back, is what had actually happened. A woman who had been surgically altered to fit a camera's expectations, who had signed a marriage contract giving her husband authority over her own behavior, who had been cycling through roles designed to make men feel dangerous and powerful by proximity, had finally, in the most self-destructive way imaginable, refused. It cost her everything professionally. She left Hollywood and didn't return.
The longest marriage she ever had.
The years between the Oklahoma disaster and the end of her marriage to Tony are the part of the story that tabloids skip. They're the part that doesn't fit any of the available narratives. Too quiet for scandal, too damaged for redemption. Gloria raised 2 children with Tony. She had 2 sons, Anthony Jr. and James. She did regional theater. She took guest roles on television shows that reached the audience she'd once had from the other direction, through a smaller screen, in someone else's living room. The Fugitive, The Outer Limits, Burke's Law, Mannix. In 1964, following the combined pressure of the custody battles and the public unraveling of her reputation, she had a breakdown. She underwent electroconvulsive therapy. She recovered, slowly, the way people recover from things like that, not by becoming who they were before, but by becoming someone else who can still function. She and Tony divorced in 1974. The marriage had lasted almost 14 years, longer than any of her other 3 marriages combined. She had a daughter from her 3rd marriage, Mariana Paulette. She had a son from her 2nd. She had 2 sons from her 4th. 4 children by 3 different men, and the man she stayed with longest was the one Hollywood called unforgivable. That same year, 1974, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She underwent radiation. She stopped smoking. She changed her diet. She told almost nobody. The cancer went away.
Liverpool. In 1978, in a boarding house in North London, Gloria Grahame was 54 years old and doing theater for pay that covered a rented room. She knocked on the door of the room next to hers and asked to borrow a shirt. The man who opened the door was 26 years old and had grown up in Liverpool and had never seen a single film starring Gloria Grahame in his life. His name was Peter Turner. They went to see Alien on their first evening together because it was playing nearby, and neither of them had any reason to go home. They talked for hours afterward. They became, over the following months, something that neither of them had a clean word for. He was half her age. She was more alive than anyone he'd ever met. In 1980, the cancer came back. It came back harder and further along than it had been the first time. She did not tell him. She kept taking roles. She kept performing. She refused surgery. A woman who had spent 30 years voluntarily going under the knife for the sake of a camera, who had destroyed the nerves in her own lip trying to be acceptable, now refused the procedure that might have saved her life. Doctors and family tried to convince her. She wouldn't. September 29, 1981. The town of Lancaster, England. A regional production of The Glass Menagerie. During afternoon rehearsal, Gloria Grahame collapsed. Turner came immediately. She made him promise not to call doctors, not to call family. He took her to his parents' house in Liverpool. His mother,
A woman who had raised 9 children in a terrace house, who had a flight booked to Australia for the following morning, opened the door, looked at Gloria once, and went back inside to unpack her suitcase. "She's not going anywhere while there's a dying woman in my house," she said. She canceled the flight. In those final days, Turner arranged something quietly. He called in a favor from someone at the Liverpool Playhouse. He got them into the building during the day, when it was empty. Someone had placed 2 chairs on the bare stage under the lights. Gloria Grahame had never played Juliet. In 40 years of Hollywood films, film noirs and musicals and westerns and dramas, no studio had ever offered her Shakespeare. She was the wrong type, too earthy, too dangerous, not classical enough for the roles that required refinement and restraint. She sat down in one of those chairs. In a voice that was not quite steady, she began the balcony scene. Turner read Romeo across from her. There was no audience, there were no cameras, there was no contract specifying what she was and wasn't permitted to do with her face or her voice or her time between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. She finished the scene. Her children arrived from America shortly after. Against the advice of her doctors, against Turner's objections, against what she herself had asked for, they arranged to have her transported back to New York. They believed she needed to be home. They believed she would receive better care there. She was put on a commercial flight on October 5, 1981. Somewhere over the Atlantic, she went into shock. The plane landed. She was taken by ambulance to St. Vincent's Hospital in Manhattan. She died that same evening. She was 57 years old. On the night they had first come to take her to the airport, the old stage manager at the Liverpool Playhouse, a man named Jack, who had worked in that building for 30 years and seen everything theater had to offer, shook his head when Turner told him what was happening. "Film stars don't die in Liverpool," he said. What she left behind. 36 years later, Annette Bening stood on a film set and played Gloria Grahame. Jamie Bell played Peter Turner. Julie Walters played the mother who unpacked her suitcase. In the closing sequence of that film, there is a small, silent cameo. A stagehand placing 2 chairs under the lights on an empty stage. That stagehand is the real Peter Turner. Nobody in the audience recognizes him. He said that was how he wanted it. Gloria Grahame has 5 films in the United States National Film Registry. It's a Wonderful Life, In a Lonely Place, The Big Heat, Oklahoma, and The Greatest Show on Earth. Critics call her one of the defining forces of post-war American cinema. Scholars write about her subversive use of feminine danger. Retrospectives describe her as ahead of her time. They write very carefully around the 13-year-old boy. They write very carefully around the lip surgeries and the cotton wadding and the marriage contracts that gave her husband legal authority over her behavior from 9 to 6, Monday through Saturday. There is something worth sitting with in the distance between the Gloria Grahame that Hollywood is comfortable honoring and the Gloria Grahame who actually existed. The one who was sold by one studio because she didn't fit the mold, remade by another studio to fit a different mold, punished when she didn't perform gratitude correctly, exploited when her real pain made for better drama than anything in the script, and finally discarded when the scandal she'd been carrying alone for a decade finally became public knowledge. She was not a good person in every direction. What happened with Tony Ray when he was 12 years old was not defensible then and is not defensible now. That is part of the truth, and it belongs in the record. But it is also true that she was a woman who was shaped from the beginning by a system that had very specific ideas about what she was for and very little interest in who she actually was. It is true that the same industry now canonizing her in retrospective articles gave her 9 minutes of screen time to win an Oscar, and then spent the next 30 years making her pay for not being grateful enough about it. It is true that she died on the same day she left the city where someone had finally given her 2 chairs and a bare stage, and Shakespeare, and no cameras, and no contracts, and no audience. Just the chance to say the words she'd always been told she wasn't the right type to say. That empty theater in Liverpool was the freest she'd ever been in front of a stage. And nobody saw it.